Hey y'all, today special treat, especially as we get ready for week 2. We're finally talking about real football, not prognosticating, saying, oh, this is what might happen if this comes together. We're actually seeing things come together, things not come together. Today we have David Bearman from ESPN, who does a lot of the betting lines. Real wizard with that stuff. David, tell the people about yourself.
Sure. I'm deputy editor of sports betting for ESPN. I directly oversee ESPN Chalk, which is our betting vertical on ESPN.com. It's somewhat hidden, so go search on ESPN.com/chalk or just search for Chalk in the drop downs. It's all of our betting content on a daily basis. Today we have our Thursday night football picks and roundtable from all of our talent, as well as Stanford Stephen the Bear college football column, which is always a fan favorite. Both of those are up today, along with other columns, ATS picks, trends, nuggets, etc. Also work on Daily Wager, which is our 6-day-a-week betting show that's on ESPN2. So make sure you tune in at 6 o'clock. And of course, Matt, I'll plug that later as well.
Cool.
But basically oversee our betting content for the company, pushing content to all the different platforms. If you watched First Take this morning with Stephen A. Smith, you might have seen Joe Fortenbaugh on with him doing a segment on sports betting. Doesn't happen often on that show, but it was a good segment this morning where Fortenbaugh, who's from Daily Wager, got on there with Stephen A. So kind of pushing that content. You'll see it in SportsCenter. You'll see it on Daily Wager. College Football Live today, Doug Kazarian will be on. So it's kind of what I do. I work with the talent, produce the betting content, and then push it. Here we go.
So people who do DFS, do you do DFS, daily?
I do.
Fantasy? Okay.
Yeah, I do DFS as well. It's not the number one priority from what I do since I do the sports betting, but we work hand in hand with the fantasy department as well to produce fantasy content and DFS. And as we all know, the DFS part of fantasy is the closest to sports betting in terms of picking these guys because you think they're going to have a good game and then possibly betting the prop. So there's a lot of overlap between the two. And you'll see on Friday and Saturday, we have some prop columns that come out that deal with DFS as well as props.
So last week's probably worst DFS play of the week, easily Cam Akers. I didn't even play him in DFS. I'm glad I haven't done DFS yet this year, but he got me exactly 0.0 points. Is that a sign of things to come? I mean, what in the world?
I always tell people, and by the way, he cost me I have 6 fantasy teams, and the only one I didn't win, I lost by 3 points, and Cam Akers was in my lineup. So I suffered the loss, and the 2 guys on my bench, which you don't want to play Monday morning quarterback. I would have never played Michael Carter ahead of Cam Akers.
No.
Last week. So it is what it is. You lost with the guy you went and got. That being said, I always tell people, do not overreact to week 1. I say that in betting, I say that in fantasy, and I say that in daily fantasy. Could it be a sign? Sure. If that's the question, could it be a sign? Yeah, maybe there's something there. But everything that I've heard this week, everything I've read this week, Cam took whatever you want to call it, the punishment, the benching, the not usage in stride. Sean McVay came out yesterday and said the reaction has been great between him and Allen Robinson, who wasn't targeted more than 2 times in his debut with the Rams. I get the feeling that, especially with the opponent being the Falcons, that there's going to be a course correction of sorts. Because, by the way, call it what it is, not using Cam Newton for whatever reason, not going Allen Robinson for whatever reason, that didn't work. They lost by 3 touchdowns to the Bills. So I'm not saying that was the reason.
It's true.
But, obviously not playing Cam Akers didn't affect them not being able to stop Josh Allen. But if the Rams are reassessing what went wrong week 1,
yeah,
they're going to put new wrinkles in there. And from what I've read and what I've seen, it looks like Akers and or Robinson should be part of the game plan. You never know how it's going to shake out. It's not a very good opponent. So that might give them, if they get up early, which I totally expect them to do, actually, like the Rams first half in this one, had extra rest. They were embarrassed on ring night. Like, they want to come out and prove they're the champs. I think they get it done against a Falcons team that, give them credit for sticking in there with the Saints, but doesn't matter who the coach is, doesn't matter who the quarterback is, they blow leads left and right. So you would think, they might have a big lead. I think the Rams roll them, and I think it starts early with some Cam Akers action.
So is he your value? Because he's probably going to be pretty cheap this year on this week on DFS.
I have not checked the prices, and I'll be full transparency. I'm probably not going to play Cam Akers in daily fantasy this week. It's one of those I want to see it first. I mean, I don't blame someone for rolling the dice there. If you're like, all right, buy low, this is a buy low situation. But as your first question attests to, it may be a bad sign. So I'm going to take the wait and see approach. I'm not playing him in my lineup either, in my regular fantasy lineup, unless I have to. But you also don't want to be the guy who doesn't play him and then he rolls 100 yards and 2 touchdowns, which is totally possible. The Falcons are not good at covering running backs in the back, catching passes. Cam Akers is one that can catch passes more than Darrell Henderson can. So game plan wise, I do expect, and I'm now talking myself into using Cam Akers. But it's a wait and see approach for me.
So you might consider on Sunday morning betting or buying low if you
Yes.
juice up all the pay high prices for everybody else and then just grab Cam Akers really low. You might do it.
I may do the same thing I did last Thursday night. My play last Thursday night, one of the many, was I took Darrell Henderson over 16.5 receiving yards, figuring Henderson would have an opportunity.
Ooh.
Little did I know Akers wasn't going to play, and then Henderson wound up with 50 receiving yards, so it was easy. I may go the opposite way and say, well, people don't think Akers is going to play much, so his line might be low, and I might take the over there. That being said, I could also be asking for a bruising if he plays three downs again. You just don't know what you're going to get. And what scares me about situations like this, when it's at least that we know, non-injury related, you wonder if something else is going on. And It's not like McVay or Akers are going to come out and say, hey, Akers was an idiot in practice and yelled at me, or he kicked my dog. You're not going to hear all that.
Yep.
So everything they're saying this week seems like they're playing nice in the sandbox, but you just, and I'll give you an example. The entire last season as a Miami Dolphins fan, we assumed it was the front office going and trying to get Deshaun Watson every single week or replace Tua. Nobody knew it was actually the head coach, Brian Flores, who didn't like Tua. That stuff was kept in-house until it wasn't kept in-house. So there are just things you don't know because you don't know, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely. So while we're on DFS, who's going to be who's your value of the week?
The value of the week. I guess I got to bring up the prices. So give me a minute.
Yeah.
Bring up the prices real quick. It's one of the things I have on my list of things to do today is set a lineup. So let's do that. Well, you know what? Let's do it while we're on the thing.
Let's do it.
Create a lineup. NFL Classic. I got to do one for tonight anyway. We'll start at quarterback. Let's see. Let's do this live. Want nothing to do with Kyler Murray. I think Joe Burrow is a buy low spot. Even in a bad game, he still threw for multiple touchdowns and 350 yards, and he's not highly priced. Stafford is value because of his injury and how bad he looked last week. He's facing the Falcons, which you and I can pass against.
Yes.
Tua is very, very low price for someone who really played well against Baltimore last year. Not a bad price. So those are some quarterbacks.
Lamar versus Miami, is that
I think Lamar will do very well against Miami. It's just the price is very, very high.
Oh, it's
very,
high.
very high.
Okay.
Yeah. Looking at the running backs real quick. Kareem Hunt, who seems to get the ball whenever they're anywhere near the goal line, is only 6,500. It's not bad. Javonte Williams, who you saw got a lion's share of the carries and or the catches last week, isn't priced bad. Cordell Patterson, who wasn't supposed to have a good year, is priced pretty low. Those are some guys. If Akers is not what we want him to be, Henderson is a good buy at low, but we won't know.
Right.
Akers and Henderson are the same price. So
okay.
Jamal Williams might be a sneaky play because DeAndre Swift is beat up and he's going to play, but you don't know how healthy he is. J.K. Dobbins is back for Baltimore. Miami struggled immensely last week against the run, so that's a buy low spot. Receiver-wise, you can't go wrong with any of the top receivers, as we saw last week. I mean, if you're going to win DFS, those Chase Adams and Kupp were insane last week.
Yep.
McLaurin's a good buy low. Waddle's a good buy low since he didn't have a great week last week.
Yep.
Michael Thomas still not getting the respect. But Tampa's a tough defense, but they don't have a great secondary. Allen Robinson would be a decent buy low if you think he's going to get the ball this week.
I'm afraid of that one. I got to stay away. I'm staying away from Allen Robinson until I see it.
Brandon Ayuk, who got off to a good start last week and then in the rain kind of was shut down because Trey Lance couldn't pass the ball in the rain. He's only 5,000 against a Seattle team that doesn't have the best defense. That's just spitballing off the top of my head a couple of the guys that I see here.
No, people. I mean, look him up. Yeah, he knows what he's doing here. So somebody who won't be priced anything this week, Dak Prescott for the Cowboys. You think that they're gonna? First off, how is that going to affect the Cowboys? And two, do they stick with Cooper Rush for however long it takes?
I can't find a fork that is big enough to stick in the Dallas Cowboys. They're, to me, beyond dead. I wasn't a big fan of them to begin with. I think that their number was highly overrated because of the Cowboys. Everybody gets blinded by the Dak and Zeke and Cowboys. They have arguably one of the worst coaches in football in terms of time management and decision-making skills. Zeke is another year older and has shown that it seems to have slowed down. They lost Amari Cooper and Cedric Wilson, so the wide receiving core is a lot limited than it was, and CeeDee Lamb can only do so much. Their defense is pretty good, as we saw against Tampa. I had the Eagles winning the division before the Eagles became the division favorite. Add to the fact that you lost Dak for a minimum of 4 weeks, and I think this team is done. They're going to lose to the Bengals this week, and they're going to be 0-2. That whole, Jerry Jones saying Dak might be back earlier than expected, that does nothing for me. Because if he does come back earlier than expected, you have the same thing that happened with Russell Wilson last year. Russell Wilson came back earlier than expected and couldn't throw the ball. Right. Same type of injury, thumb injury, fractured injury. And
you prolong the injury.
Right. So if you take anything out of what happened with Seattle last year with the first 4 or 5 games back with Russell, he was terrible. And everyone said, nobody cared because Seattle was out of the playoff picture. Nor did they expect Seattle to be in it because Russell was out. But I don't expect, quite frankly, Dak didn't look good with the good hand.
No.
Now, I think the Cowboys were a borderline playoff team to begin with. And now I think they're not a playoff team. And I'd be surprised if the Dallas Cowboys won more than 7 games this year. So forking them, done. Give the Eagles the division title, no disrespect to the Giants and Washington fans. The Eagles are the best team in that division. And you could see a scenario like last year in the AFC South where Tennessee ran away with the division and got the 1 seed because they were in an easy division while Buffalo was fighting others and Kansas City was fighting others. And the North kind of beats itself up over time. So I would not be surprised to see, and I have the Eagles over 9.5 wins to begin with. Before any of this. I think the Eagles with a very easy schedule. They were favored before the season in 14 of 17 games. I think the Eagles could run off 13 wins and get the number 1 seed. Not saying they're the best team.
Right.
The NFC is not difficult.
Right.
The schedule is not difficult. Your main contender for that division just got flushed down the toilet.
Yes.
So I think the Eagles run off 12, 13 wins and get a top 2 seed in the NFC.
Well, that's welcome ears for a lot of people who like this show. So
I'm not saying they're the best team.
No.
And Jalen Hurts has a lot to show me.
You're right.
But at the end of the day, if you were to tell me the Eagles got the 1 seed in the conference, I'd be like, well, Green Bay is missing Devontae Adams and a couple of offensive linemen. The Rams just got destroyed by Buffalo. We'll still be fine. And Tampa has Tom Brady, and that might be enough to get them to go. But they didn't look overly impressive either. That NFC is not the AFC. That's what I can say about that.
And that could be the key to the whole thing. Super Bowl seasons, crazy to talk about that, but it's a confluence of different events and circumstances. So it's, things just end up coming together. And that could be what you're talking about. Like the time that the Eagles did win the Super Bowl, if they had to play Atlanta, how badly they played in that first round against the Atlanta Falcons, if they had to go down to Atlanta or another team, play another team that day, there maybe is no Super Bowl. So a lot of things have to come together, and being at home for your first game back, getting a bye, it makes a huge difference.
That it does. It's huge. That's why, especially now that we're down to 1 bye instead of multiple byes, it didn't help Tennessee last year, obviously, and it eventually didn't help Green Bay, but it did get them to the second round. So
on the other side of the state of Pennsylvania, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, for people who are particular on those kind of things, Mitch Trubisky didn't exactly play too great. Got a lead last week against the Bengals. Bengals had him dead to rights multiple times. Despite that lead, you think that the Steelers are going to have much patience for Trubisky, or are they going to hang in there no matter what and let Pickett learn from the sidelines?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I don't think they have much of a choice. Pickett's a rookie, and it's very hard to throw the rookies in there so fast. You've seen examples of it over years. Even Peyton Manning went 3-13 in his first season, being thrown into the fire, but they didn't have a choice. They had nobody else. Trubisky wasn't great, but he was serviceable enough that when the Bengals kind of just handed you points and said, here, take some pick sixes. We're going to fumble at the 1 yard line. We're going to go for it on fourth down. Every game you could look at two ways, but this one more than others, the Bengals lost more than the Steelers won. And not to take anything away from the Steelers and your listeners, they did what they needed to do, and they won the game, period. They have a 1 next to the W and a 0 next to the L. So all power to you. Guys I work with at work are Steeler fans, some of them, and we're like, you pulled one out. Now, you had a big lead. You blew the big lead. But Cincinnati pretty much did everything in their power not to win that game.
Yes, please beat us.
Right. You're not really going to be able to keep that formula up all the time. No. That being said, I see no reason why they don't start 2-0, because I watched every single play of the Patriots game last week, being the Dolphins fan that I am. Yep. No apologies to the greater Foxborough and Boston area. Lord knows they've had enough titles in their time. It's going to be a long season for them, and it's been a long time coming. What I witnessed the other day was not a very good Patriots team. Max struggled. They don't really have any receivers to go to. I didn't think Belichick called a great game, considering they kept running through the Dolphins and then they would come back and pass it and throw interceptions. The defense is okay. Obviously, Dolphins were working in a brand new offense, so that's going to take time. But I was more unimpressed with the Patriots than I was impressed with the Dolphins start. And I think at the end of the day, I actually think the Patriots and Steelers are probably about even.
Wow.
But from what I saw week 1, I think the Steelers might be the better team. And by the way, you're getting 1.5 points at home. And if you can go into Cincinnati and beat the AFC champions, I don't see why you can't beat a struggling Patriots team, who, by the way, the quarterback is banged up as well. Losing TJ Watt is going to hurt. But one thing that I will take away from the Steelers win, and to give them the credit that I didn't give them 5 minutes ago, that defense is pretty good. Defense is really good. Obviously, a big fan of Minka. TJ being out isn't going to help, but I think that defense, that team is going to stick around because of their defense. And I've watched a lot of Miami teams stick around because of their defense. And I think Pittsburgh can win 8-9 games because of how good their defense is. And I wouldn't be surprised. They should beat the Patriots. Okay. I do like them at home, and I also like the under there, because even though 40.5 is a low number, it's not like Pittsburgh lit up the scoreboard against Cincinnati. No. They were handed points. And I watched a Patriots offense that amounted nothing all game. They got 1 touchdown on a busted coverage play, and that was all they had.
So you're saying like a 19-17 Steelers win, something like that?
That would not surprise me in the least. So, I mean, then again, Matt could gift the Steelers some touchdowns just like Joe Burrow did. But, hey, the Steelers made the plays. Like, it's not like a pick six is 100% on the quarterback.
Yep.
I just know that the Bengals had 7,423 chances to win that game, and they didn't.
Exactly.
As of today, I would put the Steelers ahead. My power rankings, Steelers are ahead of the Patriots.
So so you stuck a fork in the Cowboys, a big one, by the way, you said. Are you also sticking a fork in the Patriots for?
I am sticking a fork in the Patriots, but I'm not. I think the stick was already in there before the season started. Like, I wasn't buying them. I didn't have them as a playoff contender to begin with.
Okay.
I was surprised all season long, and I made this comparison because they were playing week 1. Odds to win the Super Bowl, NFL win total, and odds to win the AFC East were identical for the Dolphins and Patriots, or as you say in My Cousin Vinny, identical. To me, there was a big talent difference between the two. Now, could that be overcome by the fact that you got the GOAT coaching on one side and you have a guy who's never coached a game on the other? Could have.
Yep.
But anybody who watched that games knows that Mike McDaniel outcoached Bill Belichick, which you don't see often. And those two teams are not identical. And we saw that on Monday or Sunday.
Okay. I don't even want to say that's I guess you got to say, because they're two important teams that a lot of people like to count them out. So I guess I'll call it a hot take, but I don't think it's outlandish. I'll say that.
No, not at all. In fact, there was actually a note out there that it's the first time the Steelers and the Cowboys were both underdogs at home the same week in like 25 years.
Wow.
I also think that line is wrong. I think the Steelers should be favored, but
So you talked about the Steelers having some patience with Mitch Trubisky. You think they'll keep the same patience? The Niners will keep the same patience with Trey Lance?
I mean, I think right now they're pot committed and have to. They've kind of put their eggs in that basket. I know they signed Garoppolo to a little extension there, which kind of threw up some red flags that maybe they're not happy, or maybe it's the only way to trade him is to sign him a little bit longer. I don't know what's going on there. People have to keep in mind, and I tried to remind people of this with Tua 2 years ago and last year. Like, Trey Lance has played in 4 NFL games. Like, you can't get his bust ready for the Hall of Fame or throw him down the drain.
Yep.
Like, it's 4 games.
Yeah.
It is a get right spot this week. I think that they will win this game. A get right spot against, I can't remember who they play.
It's a division rival, the Seahawks.
Against the Seahawks, off short rest, off the emotional win versus Russ. I don't, by any stretch of imagination, think they blow them out. The line's 9.5, and I think that's way too much for a Niners team that can't move the ball. I think you're going to have to be patient. If the season starts getting away from them, they may just throw Jimmy G in there, see what he can do. I mean, you saw Brian Flores do it with Tua and Fitzpatrick when he needed to. If they are completely out of the race, then you got to stick with Trey Lance and let him learn.
Yeah.
But if we get to a situation where they're, 8-5 late in the year and contending for a division and or wild card, and Lance is struggling, then may see Jimmy G. I mean, the guy took him to a Super Bowl and to another NFC title game. It's not like he can't win. I think you will see Jimmy G at times, but they also got to play him to display him too. So.
To try to drive up his value. You're right there. Absolutely. Is Saquon back?
I think he's going to be more back than he was last year. I think he looked a lot more explosive. I think the game plans that the coach is putting in for him, Brian Dabble, will use Saquon a lot more. I still worry about that offensive line. The offensive line is still not good. That's part of the reason Saquon has struggled, plus the injury. I'd put him in the Miami Hurricanes, Texas Longhorns are back scenario where they could be back. Okay. But there's always going to be that whole, well, when Miami loses to A&M or Texas loses to Alabama, they're not all the way back yet.
Okay.
I don't think you're going to see Saquon from rookie year Saquon, especially behind that offensive line. But he will
back in the conversation is what you're saying.
In the conversation. And he could surprise some people. He was somebody that I had my eyes on a little bit in fantasy. I didn't get him in any leagues, but he wasn't someone I crossed off like I did last year.
Yeah, I didn't touch him. I didn't touch him this year, but that 190, I think he got 191. I might have to try to work out a trade somewhere here. I went heavy. My fantasy draft strategy this year, I went really heavy on the wide receivers, and I'll figure out the running backs later because there's only but so many that are actually worth the value at the top of the draft.
I did the exact same thing. My main league, I have Cooper Kupp, Tyreek Hill, Amon St. Brown, and Darren Waller, and we start 3 receivers / tight ends and a flex. So I got all 4. Running back, and with Pat Mahomes at quarterback, I spent a lot of my money and figured out running back later, and my running backs are Pierce and Montgomery. So, it's to be expected when you spend $150 of your $200 budget on the other positions. That being said, I like those 2 guys. I think they'll be fine. I'm not going to panic after 1 week, especially when the rest of the guys went bananas and I was fine.
Yes. I just need 9 points from you, running back.
Right. Like if Monty can get in the end zone and Pierce can have a couple of catches, we're good.
Right. So with some straight up betting lines for week 2, which will kick off on Thursday night. At home, the Chiefs are 4-point favorites against the Chargers, who don't have Keenan Allen. Where are you going there?
I actually like the Chargers in this one, and that's going to surprise some
Ooh.
people. The Chiefs obviously looked like world beaters the other day versus an Arizona defense that you and me might have had a couple of successful passes on. This Chargers defense is much better. The Chargers legitimately are probably a top 5 defense in the NFL. They've battled the Chiefs in the past. I think this is an early look at contending in that division. The Chargers play a different style of defense than the Cardinals. They're going to sit back in more of a 2-deep prevent defense and say, KC, run the ball. Go ahead, run the ball with whoever you have in your backfield, CEH, whatever, but we're not going to let you beat us deep. Like Mahomes had 5 touchdowns last week. Now, he's still going to beat them underneath, and they're still going to score points. But the Chargers have a different type of defense, and I think they hang tough. I'm going to take the 4, but I also like the under because I think that the Chargers are going to – that number is high because of what the Chiefs did last week.
Yes.
And you look at the landscape and you have Herbert and Mahomes and Kelsey, and you had Keenan Allen and Mike Williams and Austin Eckler. Like, you have explosion everywhere, so ultimately the line's high. But the way these two teams play, I wouldn't be surprised to see this as somewhere of a 27-24 type game.
Okay.
I think the line and the total are pretty close. Like, this isn't by any stretch of imagination a let's go.
Okay.
I'll probably play the prop market a lot tonight, like I do on Thursday nights. But picking a side, I would lean towards the Chargers.
Okay. Lions. We joked about this earlier. Is I kind of messed it up because for the first time in 25 games, the Lions are actually a favorite. So I told you the Lions were 1.5 point underdogs. They're actually favorites against the Commanders. You
haven't seen a minus sign next to the Lions in 25 games. So we actually did a story on that the other day. So I have no issues with them being the favorite. They've earned it. They played well last week. I think the line is about right. DC isn't bad either. It's probably not a game I'm going to play because you don't really know what you're getting out of these two teams.
No.
Carson Wentz looked okay at times, but he's Carson Wentz. I think the Lions are going to surprise. I'm not ready to buy a playoff share in them yet, but they're going to win some games here and there. Like they battled the Eagles. I think they can beat the Commanders.
Oh, yeah.
But that line is about where it should be. So it's a pass for me, just giving you the opinion on the game. If both teams played the way they played last week, the Lions win this game.
21-17 Lions. Let's go, Lions.
Could happen. It could also be 45-10 Commanders. You never know.
Yeah, because we don't know anything yet. And they did get up for that Eagles game. It was their Super Bowl.
It was. They did get up, then they got down early, and then they came back, and they had a chance there at the end. So, there's talent there. There is. But, DeAndre Swift is banged up. If he doesn't play, what are you going to get? Carson Wentz is like playing Russian roulette at times. You never know what you're going to get. So, is what it is.
Tampa Bay in Brady's House of Horrors is they're 2.5 point favorites. Do you think that people are feeling too good on the Bucs, or they're going to pull through and win this game against Jameis and the crew?
I mean, it is the House of Horrors, and I'll throw some numbers your way that I was looking up independent of the podcast. Like, Brady's 0-4 versus the Saints since the 2 years he's been in Tampa. He's only lost 9 games overall. So you're talking about like half of his losses have been home and a road versus the Saints, and he's lost in every possible way. They've lost 34-23. They've lost 38-3. They've lost 36-27. They've lost 9-0 in that primetime game we all wanted to vomit on last year that we saw. So they've lost it, and it doesn't seem to matter who the coach or quarterback is. He's lost to Taysom Hill. He's lost to Jameis Winston. He's lost to Drew Brees. So it's his kryptonite. He has a QBR of 26.8 versus the Saints, which is 17 points lower than any other team he's played since he's been in Tampa. Not to mention, and I spoke with Seth Walder, one of our analytics guys at ESPN. I asked him, I go, why is it so bad? His analytics tell him that the Saints play more two-man defense than anybody else, which is not good for a vertical offense. And that's what the Bucs are. So it is a nightmarish matchup that they have yet to figure out. And it's not like the Bucs have the same coach. They got Todd Bowles, who's a defensive guy. So I'm not convinced that the Bucs have figured anything out on offense versus the Saints, because Bruce Arians, offensive genius, couldn't figure it out. Why is his defensive coordinator going to figure it out? So not like Brady's been there the entire offseason, as we know. Was not there. He was there. He was not there. He was there. He was retired. He was married. Who knows what the heck's going on? Saints are the Bucs are fine. They're gonna probably win the division and advance.
Yep.
The Saints aren't bad either. I think the Saints are one of those borderline playoff teams and a very weak NFC. They weren't play real well early versus the Falcons, but at the end of the day, again, they got the W. Saints are at home. They're getting points. I'm going to buy it up to 3. I would advise everybody on the planet not to ever take a 2.5 point line. You got to buy it up to 3. Some expected value people would say, oh, no, you can't do that. Well, you know what? I'm not losing by a field goal, which is the most common thing in the most common number in football is losing or winning by 3. So if you're going to get 2.5, spend the 20, 30 cents, get it to 3. You don't want to lose because of a hook. And I'm going to take the points. I'm going to play the Saints in some money line parlays as well.
I like that. Raiders are 5.5, 5.5 point favorites. I think they're home versus Arizona. Who are you taking there?
The trends would the number trends, which are as good as you want them to be, would point towards taking the Cardinals, who play really well on the road. They've won 6 straight and covered in 6 straight road games under Kingsbury, and the Raiders don't play well at home as a favorite. I'm ripping that up and throwing it out the window. Like, stats are good, and I use them all the time. But anybody who watched these two teams play this week isn't going to abide by those stats. The Cardinals looked horrible versus the Chiefs at home. And the Raiders, for the L that they have in the column, the loss column, they played very well versus the Chargers. Yes, they hung in there, and there were 1 or 2 bad Derek Carr passes away from winning that game. I like the Raiders. I was big on the Raiders before the season started. I took a couple of long shots on them and Derek Carr. I do think they win this game fairly easily. I do like the over as well. The Cardinals can't stop anybody, and they have a good offense. And even against Kansas City, they scored 2 late touchdowns to push that a little bit. So I think this is in the neighborhood of probably like a 34-20 type game, and I think the Raiders win this one.
34. They win at 34-20. Wow. So Kyler Murray is going to have a rough pre-week 3.
Arizona's as much as I loved Arizona last year. I had them in the division. I had them. They're over. I had Kyler as MVP, and through 9 weeks, I looked like a genius as they were 8-1, and that I was able to hedge off of it with the Rams, which paid off at the end.
Yep.
This is a different team this year, and you have no DeAndre Hopkins. Kyler's offseason controversies with everything with the team and the franchise. The Raiders are my Arizona from last year. I played the Raiders over. I played the Raiders to win the West. They're not going to win the West, but they could get close enough that I could hedge it off. And they have an explosive offense. So I see the Raiders as somewhat being last year's Cardinals and see them making the playoffs. And they made the playoffs last year. And I think they win by a touchdown or more this week.
Wow. Okay. So buy it up to at least 7.
Hey, okay. DraftKings has a promo of any team gets up by 7, you win the bet automatically on the spot. So
I saw that. That's the one with Kevin Hart, right?
Yeah. Actually, the Thursday night game is 7 and the Sunday games are 10. So I won both of them last week. I had the Bills, who scored on the first possession and won me the bet. And then I had the Dolphins to get up by 10 versus the Patriots, and it won me the bet. Probably going to, I'm not sure either team gets up tonight by 7. It might, someone scores early, it's over. But for my 10-point thing, I'm going to take the Raiders.
Okay. The Eagles are 2-point favorites. Last I saw against the Vikings. Who are you thinking there on the Monday Night Football? One of 2 Monday Night Football games.
Yeah, 2 games, Titans, Bills, Vikings, Eagles. I talked earlier how much I think the Eagles are going to run and hide with the NFC East. They're going to win that division. They look pretty good on the road versus Detroit. I think this is another one that they're the better team here. Now, am I buying Minnesota? I think Minnesota is closer to competing for the North versus Green Bay than they were last year. As they showed last week, new offense, new coach. I'm not there yet on them. Can I think they make the playoffs? Yeah, like someone's got to make the playoffs in the NFC. They need to put 7 in there somehow. I think the Eagles are the better team, both of them coming off impressive week 1 wins. I think I would lay the 2.5 here, and anything under 3 looks good to me.
Okay. So Dave, where can we follow along, and what do you got? What are you working on, and
sure.
During the week? And what shows you doing and all that.
Yeah, going right through the entire week. If you wake up Monday morning, you'll see David Purdum's notable bets recap, betting of the weekend. That'll be up on ESPN Chalk and usually the front page of ESPN.com. We got ATS standings Tuesday. Wednesday, the Eliminator file, as well as college football nuggets are out. Thursday, we have Stanford Stephen the Bear, NFL Nuggets, Thursday Night Football preview. Friday is our massive NFL preview file for the Sunday games, as well as NFL Nuggets. And Doug Kazarian will pen a column for us Saturday morning and Sunday morning on his final thoughts before college and NFL action, and plenty more. We have an EPL preview every single week. We have a baseball daily piece every single day. Pretty soon, I hear the NBA is going to come back since their offseason usually lasts 5 minutes. But the content's on ESPN Chalk, or if you follow me on Twitter, right there on the screen, Bearman ESPN. I tweet out all the articles as well as nuggets. Everything I told you about Brady and the Bucks versus the Saints, I tweeted that out this morning, long ahead of our column. But that's out there. Bearman ESPN, ESPN Chalk. Watch Daily Wager at 6 o'clock, Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sunday mornings.
Well, thank you all for listening. Of course, Matt Rogers, POLITIDOPE. That's the personal account with a mix of all kinds of different stuff. And then, of course, you got the podcast, which is Honorable Mention Podcast, Mention Pod on Twitter, Honorable Mention _podcast on Instagram. Thank you all for listening. David, would love to have you back. See you soon.
Absolutely, bud. Thank you.
Take care.